The woman opened my back door before I even stopped the car. She climbed in without saying a word. I glanced at the Uber app. The trip hadn't started yet. According to the map, I was still 30 feet away from the pickup point. I looked into the rearview mirror. She was sitting perfectly still, staring out the window with both hands folded in her lap. Before I could ask her name, my phone vibrated. "Your passenger is still waiting at the pickup location." I looked back at the road. There was no one there. When I looked in the mirror again, she smiled. This is Tales of the Dark. A subscriber recently shared these experiences with me. They asked me to change a few names but wanted the events told exactly as they remembered them. I've been driving for Uber for almost 6 years. Weekend nights were always the busiest. Most passengers were exactly what you'd expect. People leaving bars, couples coming home from dinner, airport travelers, college students, the occasional drunk who talked too much. Nothing ever happened that made me think twice about getting behind the wheel, until one Friday night in late October. It was just after 11:30 when I accepted an airport pickup. The request came from a passenger named Emily. Her rating was 4.9 stars. The pickup location was a small side road about 10 minutes from the airport. I thought it was strange. Most airport pickups happened at the terminal, not on an empty road nearby. Still, rides are rides. I followed the GPS until I reached the location. The road was completely deserted. There were no houses, no parked cars, just an old bus stop sitting beneath a flickering streetlight. The app showed Emily standing exactly where the shelter was, but no one was there. I slowed the car. The countdown on the app still showed I hadn't reached the pickup point. Then, the back passenger door opened. I hadn't unlocked it. I looked over my shoulder. A young woman climbed into the back seat wearing a grey hoodie and dark jeans. Her long hair covered most of her face. She quietly closed the door behind her. I checked the app again. The ride hadn't started. It still told me to drive another 30 feet. "Emily?" No answer. I tried again. "Are you Emily?" A soft voice came from the back. Yes, that was enough for me. Sometimes GPS locations were slightly off. I drove forward another few feet. The ride finally started. Destination confirmed. 32 minutes away. She never spoke, not once. The only sound was the navigation telling me where to turn. Every few minutes I'd glance in the mirror. She hadn't moved. She wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't looking outside. She was staring straight ahead, almost as if she were looking through me. About 15 minutes into the drive, I tried making conversation. "Long flight?" "Nothing." "You visiting family?" Still nothing. I shrugged and focused on the road. People have bad days. I figured she just wanted a quiet ride. The destination took us farther away from the city than I expected. Streetlights disappeared, then houses. Eventually, we were driving through farmland. The navigation instructed me to turn onto a narrow gravel road. I hesitated. Passengers often requested isolated homes. It wasn't unusual, but something about this road felt different. No mailboxes, no driveways, just trees. After another mile, the GPS announced, "You have arrived." I slowed. There was nothing, just an abandoned farmhouse sitting several hundred feet away beyond an overgrown field. No lights, no vehicles. No signs anyone had lived there for years. I looked in the mirror. "We're here." The back seat was empty. I slammed on the brakes. My heart nearly stopped. I knew she had been there. I had checked the mirror less than a minute earlier. The rear door was still locked. I jumped out with my flashlight. Nobody. The gravel around the SUV was untouched. No footprints, no sound, no movement. I searched for nearly 5 minutes before getting back inside. The Uber app still showed the trip as active, passenger on board. I tapped complete ride. An error appeared, passenger not yet dropped off. I frowned, the back seat was empty. I restarted the app, same message, passenger still in vehicle. I called Uber support. After waiting on hold, a representative finally answered. I explained everything. There was a pause. Then she asked a strange question. "Can you confirm your passenger is no longer inside the vehicle?" "I've checked 3 times. Please check once more." I sighed, turned around. The back seat was still empty. "I'm looking at it right now." Another pause. Then she quietly said, "Our system still shows movement from the passenger's device." "What does that mean?" "It means the phone registered inside your vehicle." I picked up my flashlight again, searched beneath every seat. Nothing, no phone, no bag, no jacket. Nothing that belonged to a passenger. Eventually, the representative manually ended the ride. She apologized and said it was probably a GPS issue. I wanted to believe her, I really did. The next morning I forgot about it, mostly, until I opened the app. The trip receipt had finally appeared. Passenger unknown, not Emily, no profile picture, no rating, no payment information, just one word, unknown. I tried tapping the account, nothing happened. Later that afternoon, another request came through, pickup location, the same bus stop. Passenger name, Emily. I declined it. 30 seconds later, the request returned, same location, same passenger. I declined it again. It came back a third time, then a fourth. The app had never done that before. I logged off for the rest of the day. By Monday, I'd convinced myself it was just a glitch. That night, I accepted another airport ride. Different passenger, different location, normal trip. As I pulled into the terminal drop-off lane, my phone vibrated. New ride request. I glanced down. Passenger, Emily, pickup location, the back seat. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The app showed the pickup icon directly inside my own car. I slowly turned toward the rearview mirror. The back seat looked empty. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The fabric on the right rear seat was slightly compressed, as though someone was quietly sitting there. Watching me drive, I cancelled the request. The pressure on the seat disappeared. I drove straight home. The next morning, I vacuumed the car before starting work. While cleaning beneath the back seat, my hand touched something. A small silver bracelet. I didn't recognize it. There was a tiny engraved charm attached to it. It read, "Emily." I stared at it for a long time, certain it couldn't have been there before. Then my phone buzzed one final time. A notification from Uber. "Your passenger left an item in your vehicle. Please return it to complete the trip." There was no return address. No contact number, only one destination, the same abandoned road where I'd picked her up, and waiting beside the map was a message that hadn't been there before. "She's still waiting." I never accepted another request from that road. A week later, I sold the bracelet to a local pawn shop because I wanted nothing to do with it. The owner looked at it for less than 5 seconds before handing it back. "I can't buy this." "Why not?" He turned the bracelet over and pointed to the engraving. "It doesn't say Emily." I frowned. "Yes, it does." He slowly shook his head. "No, it says missing property." I looked down. The engraving still clearly read, "Emily." I walked out without saying another word. A month later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched local news archives for the abandoned road. Buried beneath years of articles, I found one small report. Nearly 12 years earlier, a young woman named Emily had disappeared after calling a rideshare service near the old bus stop. No driver ever arrived. She was never found. I closed the article immediately. I didn't want to know anything else. Some questions are better left unanswered. I stopped driving nights after that, not because I was afraid of difficult passengers, but because I never wanted to see another request from someone who might already be sitting in my back seat. I wish I could tell you that was the strangest rideshare story I've ever heard. It wasn't. The next story came from another Uber driver. Unlike mine, his passenger talked the entire ride. Looking back, he wishes the man had stayed silent. The passenger's rating was perfect. 5 stars, hundreds of completed trips. There wasn't a single reason to think anything was wrong until he got into the car. It was just after 1 in the morning when I accepted the request. The pickup was outside a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The passenger's name was Michael. His rating was a perfect 5 stars, over 900 completed trips. I actually remember thinking, finally, an easy ride. When I pulled into the parking lot, he was already waiting. Mid-40s, dark jacket, clean-shaven, small travel bag in one hand. He smiled as he opened the rear door. "Good evening." Evening, I replied. He gave me the destination, about 40 minutes away, nothing unusual. The trip started. For the first few minutes we drove in silence, then he leaned forward slightly. You've been driving for about 3 years. It wasn't a question. Yeah, you usually work Thursday through Sunday. I laughed. You've done this before. He smiled. I notice things. Fair enough. Passengers sometimes made lucky guesses. Then he said something that made my hands tighten around the steering wheel. Your daughter starts kindergarten next month. I looked into the mirror. How do you know that? He shrugged. I told you. I notice things. I hadn't mentioned my daughter. There weren't any pictures of her inside the car. My social media accounts were private. I tried convincing myself he was bluffing. Then he spoke again. You almost sold this car last winter. I didn't answer. You kept it because the transmission repair was cheaper than buying another vehicle. I looked at him again. He was staring calmly out the window, almost bored. I finally asked the question, have we met before? No, you just seem familiar. He smiled again. I've never ridden with you. The conversation stopped. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The GPS instructed me to take an exit I rarely used. The roads became quieter, streetlights disappeared. Finally, Michael spoke again. You can ignore the GPS. What? It always takes the longer route. I frowned. It updates with traffic. Not tonight. I hesitated. He gave me another road name. Oddly enough, he was right. The shortcut saved almost 10 minutes. You know the area pretty well. I've been here before. His answer felt strangely rehearsed. About halfway through the trip, my phone briefly lost signal. The navigation froze. Before I could react, Michael calmly said, "Turn left at the next intersection." The GPS screen was still blank. How do you know where we are going? You'll see. I followed his direction. A few seconds later, the GPS reconnected. It immediately rerouted, using the exact turn he'd already given me. I felt a chill run through me. He hadn't looked at my phone. He couldn't have known. The rest of the drive became increasingly uncomfortable. Every few minutes he'd casually mention another detail about my life, my favorite coffee shop, the hospital where my wife worked. The fact that I parked on the left side of my garage instead of the right. None of these things were available through the Uber app. By the time we reached his destination, I couldn't wait for the ride to end. It was a quiet neighborhood, large houses, perfectly normal. He gathered his bag before opening the door, then he paused. One piece of advice. I looked back. If you get a request from this account again, he smiled politely. Don't accept it. Before I could ask why, he stepped out. I watched him walk toward one of the houses. He never knocked. He simply disappeared around the corner. The trip ended automatically. 5 stars. I drove away. About 10 minutes later, I stopped for gas. While filling the tank, I opened the app to leave feedback. The ride history had disappeared. Not just his trip, everything from that night. It was as though I'd never worked at all. I refreshed the app, nothing. Then a new request appeared. Passenger Michael, pickup location, less than 50 feet away. I looked around the gas station. There were only 2 other customers, neither of them was him. The request expired. Another one appeared immediately, same name, same distance, 50 feet, then 49, 48, 47. The pickup location wasn't staying still, it was moving toward my car slowly, 1 foot at a time. I locked the doors before getting back inside. The app chimed again, 30 feet, 28, 26. The blue icon stopped directly beside my driver's door. No one was there. Then, someone knocked once on the driver's window. I turned so fast I nearly dropped my phone. The window was empty. No person, no reflection, nothing. The app vibrated one final time. Your passenger has entered the vehicle. I never accepted another ride after that night. The next morning, I reported everything to Uber support. I expected them to tell me there had been some kind of software error. Instead, the representative apologized and asked me for the trip ID. I searched my ride history. It wasn't there. I checked my earnings. The trip wasn't there either. It was as if the passenger had never existed. Without the trip ID, there's nothing we can investigate, she said. But I drove him. I'm sorry, sir. I understand. No, she didn't. Because every time I cleaned my car after that night, I found something that hadn't been there before. A fresh footprint on the floor mat, a fingerprint on the inside of the rear window, the faint smell of expensive cologne, little reminders that someone had been sitting behind me. Someone the app insisted had never taken a ride. 2 months later, I stopped driving altogether. Sometimes the safest decision isn't turning down one ride, it's walking away before the next one ever arrives. Unfortunately, not every driver got that chance. The final story came from a man who thought he was finishing his shift. One last ride, one last passenger, one more fare before going home. If he had ended his night just 5 minutes earlier, he believes none of this would have happened. It was almost 2 in the morning. My wife had already texted twice asking when I'd be home. I told her the same thing I always did. One last ride. The request appeared almost immediately. Pickup, Hollow Creek Road, destination not provided. That was unusual. Most passengers entered an address before requesting the ride. Still, the pickup was only 6 minutes away. I accepted it. The drive took me farther from town than I'd ever gone before. Streetlights disappeared. The houses became fewer and farther apart. Eventually, there were no houses at all. Just a narrow road winding through thick forest. The pickup pin stopped beside an old wooden bus shelter. A man was sitting alone on the bench, maybe 30 years old, dark jacket, small backpack. He stood as I pulled over. Before opening the rear door, he leaned down toward my window. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, no matter what happens," he said quietly. "Don't stop the car." I laughed. "What if you see anyone standing in the road?" His expression never changed. "Don't stop." I waited for him to smile. He didn't. He climbed into the back seat, closed the door. The trip started automatically. Destination still blank. "Where are we going?" I asked. "I'll tell you." That was all he said for nearly 20 minutes. The only sound inside the SUV was the tires rolling over the pavement. Finally, he spoke again. "Turn left." There wasn't a road, only a narrow gravel path disappearing into the trees. "You sure?" "Yes." The GPS had completely frozen. No map, no signal, just a grey screen. I turned anyway. The gravel road seemed to go on forever. Every few minutes I checked the mirror. The passenger hadn't moved. He was staring out the rear window, watching the darkness behind us. Then he leaned forward, slowed down. I eased off the accelerator about 50 yards ahead. Someone was standing in the middle of the road, a woman, barefoot, wearing a long white dress stained with mud. She wasn't waving, she wasn't screaming. She was simply standing there, perfectly still. Facing us, my foot moved toward the brake. "Don't." The passenger's voice was calm. "Keep driving. What if she's hurt?" "She isn't." I hesitated. The woman slowly lifted one hand, not asking for help, beckoning as though she wanted us to come closer. Every instinct I had told me to stop, but something in the passenger's voice made me listen. I pressed the accelerator. The SUV passed within a few feet of her. She never turned her head. She never flinched. She simply stood there, smiling. I looked into the side mirror. She was gone. The road behind us was empty. I swallowed hard. "What was that?" The passenger didn't answer. Instead, he quietly said, "She's following us now." I looked in the mirror again. Nothing, just darkness. Then I heard it. A soft knock, 3 taps from inside the trunk. Knock, knock, knock. My stomach tightened. "Did you hear that?" The passenger nodded. "Don't stop." The knocking came again, louder this time, as if someone trapped inside the trunk wanted out. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. "We need to check." "No, what if someone's?" "There isn't." The road curved sharply. The knocking stopped for a few moments. Everything became silent again. Then my dashboard clock reset. 2:14 a.m. It had been 2:14 when I picked him up. The time refused to change. Minutes passed. Still 2:14. The fuel gauge dropped unexpectedly. Half a tank, quarter tank, almost empty, even though we'd barely driven 30 miles. Then the passenger suddenly spoke. "Pull over." I looked ahead. An old farmhouse stood alone at the end of the road. One porch light glowed faintly. I stopped beside the gate. Before getting out, the passenger looked directly at me for the first time. "You listened." "What? You didn't stop?" He reached into his pocket and handed me a folded $20 bill. "Go home, that's it," he nodded. Then he walked toward the farmhouse. Halfway there, the porch light went out. He disappeared into the darkness. I waited, nothing, no door opening, no footsteps, just silence. I drove away. The moment I reached the main highway, my phone regained signal. The Uber app chimed, "Trip complete, fare $18, $72 passenger, unavailable, destination unknown." I laughed nervously. I just wanted to get home. The next morning, I unfolded the $20 bill he'd given me. Something else was wrapped inside it, a yellow newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local man missing after warning rideshare driver not to stop." The article was dated 11 years earlier. The photograph beneath it showed the same man who had been sitting in my back seat. I stared at it until my hands began shaking. He hadn't gone missing recently, according to the article. He had disappeared more than a decade ago. I drove back to Hollow Creek Road that afternoon. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof that I'd imagined everything. The old bus shelter was still there, so was the gravel road, but the farmhouse didn't exist, only an empty field. An elderly farmer working nearby noticed me looking around. "Can I help you?" he asked. I was looking for the house at the end of this road. He frowned. "There hasn't been a house here since the fire." "When was that?" He thought for a moment. 12 years ago. "Did anyone survive?" The old man looked away. "Only the driver." "What driver?" "A rideshare driver. He picked up a fellow out here late one night. They say the driver ignored a woman standing in the road. He kept driving." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "What happened?" "The passenger vanished before they reached town. The driver quit the next day. He never explained why." I thanked him and returned to my car. Before starting the engine, I checked the back seat. Empty. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Maybe it was finally over. Then the seatbelt warning chimed. The dashboard showed rear passenger buckled. I looked into the mirror. The seat looked empty, but the belt was stretched tightly across someone I couldn't see. I sold my car that same week. I never drove for Uber again. Sometimes people ask why. I always give them the same answer, because there are some passengers who don't need a ride. They're only waiting for someone willing to stop. If you are brave enough to hear more nightmares, subscribe to Tales of the Dark. And if you have your own terrifying experience, leave it in the comments or send your story by email. Maybe your nightmare will become the next story told here.